Transfer student experience.
The transfer student experience.
The transfer student experience.
The transfer student.
Make my voice sound like Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll apply the Australian accent effect onto your voice. Yeah. You're engineering things that fly. Let's just say that.
Yes, there you go.
And you were a VP at the engineering club back at Santa Rosa.
Yeah. At my previous junior college, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. And I thought that was the main thing that I was kind of lacking in sort of my professional development. And so when I came to USC and we had kind of a virtual career fair or involvement fair, I was just kind of like applying to everything. I just wanted to start getting experience, start doing stuff, and then kind of slowly regulated what I wanted to do. I am aerospace, so I am focusing on flight mechanics and rocket design and stuff like that. So I'm part of RPL right now and Aspen. RPL is the Rocket Propulsion Lab, and then Aspen is the Advanced Space Propulsion and Engineering Laboratory. Those are both just two really crazy clubs that I'm probably going to stick with for the rest of my time at USC. And then in terms of classes right now, I'm taking differential equations, linear algebra, and hybrid course, which is just the Math 245. And then I'm taking Physics 152, which is electricity and magnetism. And I'm taking AME 201, which is just statics. Everything's pretty easy except for the physics part. That's a little difficult. So electricity and magnetism, I've always heard to watch out for. Kind of glad I'm approaching it with a cautious mind. But I've also have Chris Sutherland, and he's like TikTok famous.
He's so chill, man. He's so chill.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So that's really cool too. But in terms of classes, just GEs and everything, I'm taking 19 units. And with it being remote, there's no distractions. So I'm able to really get a lot of it done. And especially with being at USC, then, I mean, you don't have to worry about having to go out and having to go party and stuff.
I mean, that's not necessarily a good thing, though. I mean, it's that sort of what makes USC. But
it's a little back and forth with it.
There's less social pressure, which as an engineer, great, right? Because most of us are nerdy and introverted. So
yes, exactly.
For sure. And so in terms of like schedules, workloads, online classes, what was the most difficult part of ramping up as a transfer in COVID?
So coming from the JC, it's very similar. So I kind of got most of the rough first few steps kind of occurred at my ending spring semester at my junior college, getting accumulated to that and kind of getting a setup. So like I went out and got another monitor and just kind of did a dual monitor system. And that's super beneficial. It helps your productivity, everything. And a lot of like kind of getting used to it and getting in a schedule happened there at the community college. It was rough, definitely not the same. Learning was a little bit harder and I relied a lot on YouTube for a lot of my stuff. But in terms of the transition and kind of that contrast with USC, I would actually say that the classes are not so much different because they are online. I think that a lot of the benefit that would come from attending a USC class is hindered. I'm just getting another Zoom lesson from a different professor, and there's not a lot of opportunity in that on paper that is kind of benefiting me that's reflecting the tuition. However, with that, like I can't ignore the fact that there is a ton of resources that USC does provide, and then there's a bunch of opportunities that you can take advantage of that comes along with the tuition. Like I wouldn't be part of RPL or Aspen. I wouldn't have a bunch of academic support or opportunities like TSC. Those are all things that kind of come alongside with that, and it kind of eases a little bit of the frustration I have, but I wouldn't say the difficulty's amped up. You don't have a virtual reality system set up or something like that, which you would expect, but
that's next year.
Yeah, that's next year.
When we transfer into college, we definitely sort of go through challenges in how the university communicates their resources. It took me a while just to get acclimated and just finding out about stuff like that's happening on campus. Like, oh, there's this lab or there's this thing that I could be a part of. And so I'm curious to know from you, what communication challenges did you face? And maybe what would you wish that TSC as an organization made more clear to you in those initial stages?
I didn't know about TSC until maybe a couple weeks leading up into the semester. So that gap period between me getting accepted, which was, I heard back in mid-June, which was already kind of late, but mid-June I heard back. And then up until about a week or two before the semester started, I was almost by myself in terms of trying to figure everything out, trying to sign up on email lists. It was very crazy and it was pretty stressful. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, trying to get all the resources and make sure I wasn't missing anything and make sure that like I wasn't going to try and go into classes one day and then they're like, oh, you didn't submit this, sub document, you can't come here. And one of the main things that helped me was getting just a notebook. I mean, it's old fashioned ish, but if I were to get an email, I would, write down who sent me it and like kind of the context, give it a little scope of like, oh, okay, well, William sent me an email about TSC. Like, here's his email. What's TSC? Kind of wrote down a little blurb. And then that way I can keep kind of like these little things organized. And that helps me kind of settle it, because when you're just getting a barrage of emails, you're just kind of like, well, what am I going to do? Like, this is too overwhelming. I'm just going to delete all of them. And then you just miss out on a bunch. So it was difficult. But once I started researching those initial emails and that initial contact, it kind of opened up the doors for me to research a lot of other things. Let's say the involvement fair sends me something and they're like, hey, we have an involvement fair coming in like a month. Like, check that out. Well, okay, what are the clubs there that might be interesting? And then I find the clubs and then I research them. And then, I find Aspen or something and I'm like, that's really cool. And just not being afraid to go down a rabbit hole in terms of like research and going off of different tangents, because then that's how you explore and that's how you find everything that you can. TSC related, personally, I've had a great time so far with TSC. It was a calm welcoming. It wasn't like oh my God, I got to figure out everything. It was just kind of like oh, cool, I'm in this community now. And then the continuous support and emails and sending through that kind of stuff was just like, this is really nice. Like, I don't have to check a website. I don't have to go and do this or do that every week or bi-weekly. It's kind of the fact that you guys actually send out information rather than being like, click this link to find out, was super helpful.
Obviously, it's still early days, right? And I mean, if I had asked you in 2019 what 2020 was going to be like, you probably wouldn't have said this. You're rubbing your face. You're like, yeah, nah.
No.
So there might not be a straightforward answer to this one. But what career goals are you aiming towards? Is it working for a company in aerospace? Is it starting your own business eventually? What plans do you have after graduating? And how does aerospace right now fit into that goal?
There's levels to it. I'll preface with that. When I got out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do in terms of a professional kind of career. I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be happy with that comfort, right? Where I don't have to worry about a dollar. So I started with CS, and that's when I did a year at CS at the JC. And then I did another year where I actually switched, and I kind of had this epiphany where I wanted to do something more. I kind of sat there and picked at a bunch of colleges. I was looking at Notre Dame, USC, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, just kind of a bunch of these kind of higher tier colleges coming from where I was at. And I was like, okay, well, now I want to figure out a major. Let's write down a bunch of majors that I think would be interesting. And figured out aerospace, there's mechanical, there was biomedical. For a second, I kind of joked about it. I was like, I'm going to do aerospace at University. So University of Notre Dame was my first choice a while back. And I know that's totally against Tommy the Trojan, but
yeah, don't say that. I'll cut that out just so you don't. Yeah.
After I kept saying it, I one day actually found myself, I was just like, oh, I'm here. And I was, this was October last year. I was actually visiting Notre Dame's campus and talking with counselors and stuff. And it kind of hit me that this is real and that I was actually working towards something that I really wanted to do. Come application time for USC, I sent through an application. By this time, USC was my top choice by far. Just a program here for AE, ASTE, AME, like everything is just really, really good. So I applied. It was my first choice. And I didn't expect to get in because I only had a year underneath the major. And I got in. And it was super shocking. Looking back, I don't think I was ready. And I don't think I am ready now to even be here because I don't necessarily have it all planned out. However, I want to contribute to something larger than life. And I think aerospace is a great outlet for that. You're going literally larger than life out into the atmosphere and beyond. And so coming into USC doing aerospace and being with all these organizations, I think it's still yet to hit me that this is kind of real. It's a very surreal transition from where I was to where I am now. And it's only been pretty much a year. In the face of COVID, I don't want to sound like that guy, but I kind of laugh because I got into USC and I got into these organizations and I got involved and fully integrated into USC throughout it all. I mean, it does kind of beg the question of what would have happened if there wasn't COVID, right? Maybe how successful would I have been, or maybe there's a opportunity cost to it. But in my personal kind of outcome from it, I haven't necessarily seen the direct impact in terms of like what I can do throughout it. And I think based off of my previous experiences with it, that I don't think it should be a limiting factor for me in the future. And I think that I could still continue to grow and develop and pursue my passions, whether it be, developing rocket technology or maybe something else I find later down the road. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Hopefully, it gives up, right? I'm not trying to beg a fight with it, but I don't see it being the limiting factor on my progression.
That's something that I really want to draw upon, right? The fact that you did go through hell to get here. And so question to you is, what value would a company see in someone like you who's gone through those tough situations and has transferred successfully?
Kind of like I like to look at it as the idea of natural selection applied to jobs. A very non-resilient species is not going to evolve. It's not going to do well in the environment. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I would consider myself resilient for the fact that I was able to all right, I did CS for a year, but now I really don't want to. It's not the end of the world. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to start from square one, try again and do something else. To broaden the spectrum a little bit, I think having any sort of well-rounded person in the professional setting is going to totally outweigh a specialist. Like, let's say I'm Mark Zuckerberg. I can code. I'm a mean coder, but nobody wants to hire a Mark Zuckerberg anymore. That was the thing when it wasn't common and coding was some sort of legit superpower. But now the fact that it's being consistently taught and everybody's starting to get it, I feel like companies are more inclined to hire somebody who has a diverse skill set, who has a general understanding of a lot of things rather than a specialized narrow niche for their education.
For sure, because once it's teachable, you become replaceable.
Yeah, you see that nowadays too is engineering. It used to be top dog, and it still is, but it's okay, you have a bachelor's in engineering. I don't know about that. So now everybody's okay, the master's is the new standard, right? You need to get a master's in engineering if you want to get a good job. That kind of goes into the whole so you can either make yourself really specialized and so you really want to stand up, just get a PhD, or you can be well, maybe I have a double bachelor's, or maybe I have, I have my master's degree, but I'm also well-rounded in humanitarian stuff, or, I have a bunch of side work with computer science while I'm doing this kind of mechanical stuff. That's going to make you a more lethal employee and more favorable in sort of any sort of incorporation scene.
For sure. It's about having complementing skills. Sales and engineering, two very powerful combos right there. If you can build something and sell it,
that's a business.
You can, yeah, exactly.
That's a business.
You don't even need the job at that point.
Exactly.
Why did you want to transfer to USC? Was it culture, brand image, location, money? Talk me through your decision process. You knew that things were probably going to be online. Why transfer to USC?
So when I applied out of high school, the only college I got into, I applied to 7. 6 were UCs. 1 was San Diego State. I got rejected by all of them except San Diego State, and I chose to stay behind at a community college because I wasn't sure if that was right for me. Kind of going through that epiphany that I had mentioned earlier, it was a lot of kind of talk with my dad, and he kind of helped guide me, be well, listen, I think you can do a lot more than go to San Diego State. Sorry, Aztecs, but it's just, we gotta be real here. And he kind of encouraged me to kind of to shoot higher than a California State school or a lower end UC Merced. Kind of hit me where I was I think I can do that. And USC being one of the top schools in the nation and one of the top schools in the world for aerospace, it was almost just a challenge to get here. I kind of just wanted to challenge myself. That was a fun part of it. It was kind of a mini competition. And then I also was really attracted to the school because of the culture, the student body. That was a huge thing that stuck out for me. And especially when I went to Notre Dame, that's why it took one of the top positions for me. The student body is a huge thing. And that's probably one of the only reasons why COVID has been so hard, is because I get a little drained if I don't have a little bit of social interaction. I'm definitely not an extrovert to that manner, but being by yourself at a desk for 3 weeks straight is a little bit rough. And then the academics too, with USC Viterbi being, one of the best engineering colleges in the nation, and the departments that they have and the opportunities and funding that they give. Like RPL has just a ridiculous budget. They were the first dominantly student-led organization to have a rocket pass the Kármán line, which is the barrier between space and the atmosphere. And so they were the first to ever do it. And it happened in April 2019. And like when I was reading into that, I was like, this is like what I want to be doing. Like it would be dumb of me to go anywhere but here.
I think there's definitely like a recurring theme across transfers. It's sort of that call to a higher purpose. Even it's like you said, just that challenge. You're like, you know what? I am destined for bigger things. And I guess it's a nice metaphor that you're doing rockets, because that's literally, going to higher places.
Yeah.
There's definitely that element there of wanting to challenge yourself, wanting to go out of your comfort zone. If you could go back in time to your younger self and give yourself one piece of advice, it could be anything. It could be life advice. It could be transfer advice. But if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice.
I've thought about this question so many times because I've gone through so many phases in my life of what I thought I was and like who I was going to be. If I may do two, the first being that don't care what any other person thinks. One of my main things growing up, and quite frankly, going up into like maybe even my senior year of high school, was that I cared about, the littlest thing. And I wanted to be socially accepted, or I wanted to do this, or like, oh, I needed to not pay attention in this area of my life because it wasn't deemed cool. Perfect example, in my senior year, we were doing period systems. So we had 6 periods. I took 2 of them as off periods in my senior year because I just wanted to go hang out with friends. And I wanted to like build social relationships in that manner with, different friend groups and stuff like that, when I could have been spending that time taking classes that were probably applicable to my major. Because I avoided physics, I avoided high school, I avoided all engineering courses throughout high school, and I never touched it until I got into the community college. And then I also think a lot of the distress I felt mentally and that sort of handling and understanding of myself was framed along what I thought people wanted me to be, or what they thought I should be. It was just a huge thing for me. And I always wanted to make sure that I was the nice guy, likable guy, socially conforming guy. And I think that did a lot of damage and it sacrificed a lot of opportunity for me. And if I could go back and change that and just be like, don't worry about anything. Don't give a damn. Just do you. That could have woken me up a lot sooner, because that kind of wake up call didn't come until pretty much going into the junior college. And then the second kind of piece of advice I would give is shoot beyond what you can imagine. Do something a lot bigger than you think is even possible. Because one of the things with me, I think, was just that kind of, you have that invisible ceiling. When as soon as you set your goal, there's an invisible ceiling there. I need to now do a comparison with what do I think, the world is going to let me do. And that brings the bar kind of low, and that brings the ceiling pretty limiting. And so that's why I was like, I'm just going to do computer science at my community college because it's a safe major. I can make money. Kind of having that talk with my dad. Like, my dad was first generation college. He had a buddy tell him one day, he was like, dude, you're kind of smart. He's like, what do you mean? Like, he's like a total not standout student in high school. He lived up in like Eureka, Santa Rosa area, and was always out just being a kid. And he's like, yeah, you should go to college, man. Like, I think you could do it. And he's like, really? All right, maybe I will. So I went to the Army and like got a GI Bill for it and won a Davis and graduated with a bachelor's in engineering. Now he's just like, he's one of my like biggest mentors and somebody I look up to, because he was able to kind of overcome what he was given as his initial opportunity and like his initial conditions, and just change that into so much more. And time back, he kind of channeled that tradition with me and sat me down when I was worrying about getting into San Diego State for computer science. He was like, I think you're kind of smart, man. You could do a little bit more.
The same conversation.
Yep. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, buddy, I think you could go to some like higher colleges. I was like, damn, never thought about that. I think you're right. And then that's when the kind of joking happened, and that's when I found myself like at Notre Dame's campus, and that's when I found myself, applying to USC. And I would have never had done any of this. I would have finished my associates in CS. I'd probably be in San Diego right now. And if I didn't have that conversation with somebody telling me you can do more, I would be at a lot lower spot in my life. Probably not even happy.
Don't listen to the haters.
Yeah, don't listen to the haters. It's good.
That's awesome advice. I think especially came from a non-traditional background. You weren't the A+ student in high school doing physics and chem, and everybody knew you're going to be the next bloody Elon Musk engineer dude, right? You sort of almost fell into it, right?
Yep.
I think that's super interesting. The fact that you can just fall into a position that you don't have to follow the cookie cutter path, of doing physics and making it your whole life. You can do this crazy path that you've taken. Not that we're suggesting be all over the place, but, find out what you love. And if that's, means doing a bunch of stuff before actually finding it, then do it. But in saying that, don't let people tell you what you're capable of.
Yeah, just kind of wander until you find your path. That's kind of how I think about it. There's a lot of ways you can go, and you can try to go for that 1600 SAT in high school, and you can try to pull a 4.5, whatever, and get your college essays reviewed by 37 people. But you got to make sure that you know what you're doing, or else, if you're not happy along the journey, then you're just doing it wrong.
Thank you so much, man, for taking the time to speak with me. It's awesome to speak with people that want to do cool shit.
Yeah.
That want to shoot stuff off into the stratosphere.
Thank you. Yeah. That means a lot.
The transfer student experience.
The transfer student
The transfer
experience.
student experience.